My half-sister announced at my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner that I had promised her my downtown condo. Then she grabbed my arm so hard she left a bruise. She didn't know our grandmother's estate attorney was sitting 2 seats away. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without the context. And the context is long and ugly, and I've spent most of my adult life pretending it wasn't. My name is Celeste. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed CPA with my own small firm. 4 employees, good clients, a reputation I built from nothing. My mother was my grandmother, Nana Joe's only child from her first marriage. When Nana Joe remarried, she had my uncle, and then, late and unexpected, my Aunt Sandra. Sandra is technically my great-aunt, but she's only 9 years older than me, and for most of my childhood she was just Sandra, the one who borrowed my hair ties and ate the last of the cereal and never replaced it. Sandra got pregnant at 23. The father was a man named, and I'm not making this up, Fletcher. Fletcher of the wraparound sunglasses and the energy drink sponsorships and the deeply held belief that hustle culture was a personality. He lasted 14 months. Their daughter, my half-cousin Jade, has been a fixture in my life since she was born. I love Jade. I have to be clear about that because what I'm about to tell you is not about Jade. Jade is 21 and working toward her nursing degree, and she had nothing to do with any of this. This is about Sandra. Sandra has always had a talent I genuinely envied when I was younger and now recognize as dangerous. She can make you feel like she's doing you a favor by accepting help from you. She has this way of receiving things, money, time, effort, like she's taking on a burden on your behalf. When our grandmother paid her electric bill one winter, Sandra said, "I'm letting you do this because I know it makes you feel needed." I was 18 when I heard that. I remember thinking it was one of the most remarkable things I'd ever witnessed. I bought my condo 4 years ago. 3rd floor of a building in the midtown area of our city, 2 bedrooms, exposed brick. A little balcony where I grow tomatoes badly every summer. I saved for 9 years for the down payment. I skipped vacations, I packed lunches, I drove a car with a broken AC through 2 Georgia summers. That condo is mine in a way that almost nothing else in my life is mine. I designed the bookshelves myself. I sanded the floors on a long weekend in October. I know which floorboard creaks and exactly how to step to avoid it at 6 a.m. About 18 months ago, Sandra started asking questions about it. Not casual questions. Inventory questions. What's the square footage? What did I pay for it? What's the HOA like? Is the parking deeded or assigned? I answered honestly the first few times because they seemed like harmless curiosity. Then she came to visit one Sunday and spent most of the afternoon photographing the rooms on her phone. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was getting inspiration for her eventual place. Her eventual place. She was renting a 2-bedroom apartment 30 minutes away with Jade, who was, at that point, 18 and about to leave for college. I thought maybe she was thinking ahead, planning. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because I always gave Sandra the benefit of the doubt. 3 months later, she mentioned, almost in passing, that once Jade moved into the dorms, Sandra was probably going to need somewhere to stay. Temporarily, she said. Just until I find the right situation. I said she was welcome to stay a few weeks while she figured things out. She said, "I knew you'd say that, you're so generous." She said it the way she said everything, like she was handing me a compliment that was also slightly a receipt. She moved in 6 weeks later, with 12 boxes, a sectional sofa, and Jade's old cat. I want to be fair here. The first month was fine. She paid the agreed-upon amount toward utilities. She cooked dinner twice a week. She kept the kitchen clean. I thought, okay, this is working. This is what family does. Then it shifted. Slowly, the way these things always shift. So gradually you don't see it until you're already in the middle of it. She stopped paying her share in month 2 because she'd had a rough week. She started having her friends over without asking. She rearranged my living room while I was at work one Thursday, moved the couch, rehung 2 of my prints, swapped out my throw pillows for some of hers. When I came home and stood in the doorway of my own apartment, genuinely disoriented, she said, "Don't you think it flows better?" I said, "Clearly, Sandra, this is my home, and I need you to ask before you change things." She looked hurt. She said, "I'm just trying to make it feel like home for both of us." Both of us. I let it go. I let it go because it was easier, and because I loved her, and because I have spent my entire life being the responsible one in our family. And responsibility has a way of training you to absorb things without complaint. The demand came 4 months in. She sat me down at my own kitchen table, with 2 cups of coffee she'd made, as though she were the host, and she said she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She said she felt that our arrangement was imbalanced. She said she'd spoken to a real estate attorney. An attorney, she said, who had advised her that given the nature of her residency and the length of time she'd been living there and contributing to the household, she might have certain rights. I set my coffee down. She said she wasn't trying to be difficult. She just thought it made more sense, logistically, for her to take over the condo. She had Jade's old room. She'd built a routine. And I was so busy with work, didn't I want to consider something smaller, something with less upkeep? She could buy me out over time, she said. She'd spoken to a mortgage broker. She could probably qualify for something in the $40,000 range. My condo is worth $420,000. I told her the conversation was over and she needed to start looking for another place to live. She cried. She said I was abandoning her. She called our grandmother that night and told her I was acting erratic and threatening to put her on the street. Nana Jo called me confused and worried. I explained what had actually happened. Nana Jo was quiet for a moment and then said, "Oh, Sandra." Just like that. 2 words, the weight of decades behind them. Sandra did not move out. She stopped looking for apartments. She started texting members of our extended family, cousins, my uncle, her old friends who knew me tangentially, saying she was in a difficult situation and that I had changed. She filed nothing legally. The attorney story, I suspect, was invented entirely. But the soft campaign she ran on my reputation was real and it was deliberate, and it worked on enough people that the next family gathering had a distinct chill to it. Which brings me to Nana Jo's 80th birthday dinner. My grandmother wanted the party at her house. Nothing extravagant. She's not an extravagant woman. She wanted her dining room table, her good china, the lemon cake from the bakery on Clemens Street that she's been ordering from since 1987. She wanted family. There were 11 of us around the table. My uncle and his wife. Their 2 adult kids. Sandra. Jade, who'd driven down from her college town for the weekend. 2 of Nana Jo's oldest friends, Dorothy and this is the detail that matters, Dorothy's husband, Gerald. Gerald has been a practicing estate and property attorney in our state for 38 years. He's 71, soft-spoken, completely unassuming. He and Dorothy have known my grandmother since before my mother was born. He sat to Nana Jo's left and spent most of dinner asking her about her tomato garden and complimenting her on the roast. I knew Gerald professionally. He had handled the deed transfer on my condo. He had drawn up my will the previous year. He knew exactly what I owned and exactly what I'd pay for it. Sandra did not know any of that. Dinner was lovely for the first hour. Nana Jo was radiant. Jade had made a little photo book as a gift, and my grandmother cried in the good way, dabbing her eyes with her cloth napkin and then waving everyone off when they fussed. My uncle gave a toast. Dorothy gave a toast. I was in the middle of cutting my second slice of lemon cake when Sandra stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a spoon. The table quieted. "I just want to say," Sandra began, her voice bright and warm and carrying just the right amount of performative emotion, "that this family has been through so much, and I think what matters, especially on a night like tonight, is that we take care of each other." She looked around the table, meeting eyes, letting the moment breathe. She had clearly planned this. And I want to publicly acknowledge Celeste. She turned to me and smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. "Who has graciously committed, as you all know, to signing over her condo so that I have a permanent place to raise Jade." The room went very still. "She hasn't told everyone yet," Sandra continued, dropping her voice into a conspiratorial warmth. "But it's been decided. And I just think, on a night about love and family, it's worth celebrating." She started to raise her glass. I said, quietly, "That's not true." Sandra blinked. "Celeste?" "That is not true," I said again, and I was surprised at how steady my voice was. "I have not committed to anything. I have not discussed signing over my home to you. I have never said anything remotely like that." The table was so quiet, I could hear Dorothy set her fork down. Sandra's smile went brittle. We talked about this. You know we talked about this. We talked about you moving out, I said. That's what we talked about. And that was when she grabbed my arm. She reached across the corner of the table and grabbed my forearm, just above the wrist, and squeezed. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was the grip of someone trying to communicate something through pressure. Stop, cooperate, do not make this worse for me. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. It left 4 distinct finger-shaped marks that I found when I got home and rolled up my sleeve in the bathroom light. Ladies, my uncle said, his voice strained. Gerald cleared his throat. He did it once, softly, and the sound was somehow enough to make everyone at the table turn to look at him. He set his napkin on the table with the same careful precision of someone who has spent 4 decades in courtrooms and knows exactly how to take up space. Sandra, he said pleasantly, as though he were commenting on the weather, I'm going to stop you there, because I think there may be a misunderstanding, and I'd hate for it to get worse. Sandra stared at him. Gerald, this is a family matter. I'm aware, he said, still pleasant. I've known this family for 50 years. And in my professional capacity, I've also handled several of Celeste's legal documents, including the deed to the condominium you're describing. He folded his hands on the table. That property is held solely in Celeste's name. There is no signed agreement, verbal or otherwise, that would transfer that asset. What you've just described to this table did not happen. And I'd gently encourage you, before you say anything further, to be very careful about the claims you're making publicly about property you do not own. He said it in the tone of a man offering directions. Mild. Even, completely unmovable. Sandra opened her mouth. Closed it, her eyes cut to me, and for one moment I saw it clearly. Not anger, not embarrassment, but calculation. She was still running the math. Jade said, Mom. Just that one word. Her face was mortified. The dinner did not recover, exactly. But it also didn't implode. My uncle poured more wine. Dorothy began talking about the garden. Nana Jo held my hand under the table for the rest of the meal and didn't let go. Sandra left early. She said she had a headache. She did not say goodbye to me. On the drive home, I called my friend Priya, who is a paralegal and who I have called in every crisis for the last 8 years. I sat in my car in the parking garage below my building and I told her everything that had happened, including the grip on my arm. Priya was quiet for 10 seconds and then said, Celeste, I need you to take photographs of your arm right now while the marks are still visible, and I need you to text them to me and also to your email so there are 2 timestamps. Do it before you go upstairs. I did it. The marks were clear. 4 fingers, slightly purple in the garage light. I sent the photos to Priya and to myself, and then I sat there for another minute thinking about how my grandmother had turned 80 years old that night, and how the lemon cake had been exactly right, and how Sandra had managed to make even that into something I would have to spend the next month untangling. I went upstairs. Sandra's things were still everywhere. Her coat on my hook, her vitamins lined up on my bathroom counter, her cat asleep on my couch in the self-satisfied, boneless way cats sleep. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed and thought, I am done. Not angry done. Resolve done. I had been absorbing Sandra for so long that I had started to think absorption was the only option. It wasn't. I just needed to stop pretending it was. I texted Priya, I want to talk to an attorney Monday morning. Not Gerald. Someone she doesn't know. Someone aggressive. Priya responded in 4 minutes with 3 names. The attorney I chose was named Marissa, and she was, as advertised, aggressive. She was also methodical, which I liked more. We met on Monday, and I laid out the timeline. Sandra moving in, the demand about the condo, the campaign with family members, the dinner. The grab. Marissa listened without interrupting and then asked me 3 precise questions about the verbal agreement I had made. Or rather, had not made, about Sandra's residency. You said a few weeks, Marissa confirmed. A few weeks, I said. Maybe a month, I said, just while she figured out her next steps. She's been there how long? 4.5 months. Marissa wrote something down. Okay. In this state, after 30 days of continuous residency, she does have tenant rights, regardless of any formal lease. That's the bad news. She looked up. The good news is, she doesn't have a legal leg to stand on regarding ownership, and the dinner incident, combined with the arm, gives us grounds for a formal no-contact demand and a significant amount of leverage. I'd like to send a notice of eviction today and a cease and desist regarding any further public misrepresentation of property agreements." She paused. "The grab? Have you decided whether you want to file a police report?" I had thought about this on and off all weekend. Sandra was family. She was Jade's mother. Yes, I said. "I want to file it." Marissa nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Good. It establishes a record. You don't have to press charges to file. But having it documented matters, especially given her pattern of making claims that aren't true. If she escalates, you'll want that paperwork." I filed the report that afternoon. The officer who took my statement was professional and thorough. She photographed the bruise, which had deepened by then to a dark purple-blue at the center. She asked if I felt safe at home. I said I didn't know, which was the honest answer. The eviction notice was served the following day. I was in a client meeting when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sandra. "You are destroying this family. You are a selfish, ungrateful person, and I hope you understand what you're doing." Then another, "I have nowhere to go. You know that. Then you'll regret this." I turned my phone face down and finished the meeting. What came next was 2 weeks of Sandra mounting a campaign I can only describe as exhausting in its thoroughness. She texted every cousin she had a number for. She called my uncle 3 times. She left a long voicemail for Nana Jo that my grandmother, bless her, listened to once and then set her phone on the kitchen table and said, "To no one in particular, she gets this from Fletcher." Sandra posted a story on Instagram, not naming me directly, but tagging our city and using the phrase, "family who uses you and throws you away," which 17 people I knew saw, and exactly one person, a cousin I haven't spoken to in 4 years, actually engaged with sympathetically. 2 of my closest friends from college screenshot it and sent it to me with varying degrees of outrage on my behalf. Marissa sent Sandra a letter within 48 hours citing the post as potential defamation and advising her to remove it. She did. What Sandra had not counted on in any of this was Gerald. Gerald, it turned out, had not simply let the dinner moment pass. He had spoken to Nana Jo privately the following week. He had, in his careful, methodical way, explained to her what he had witnessed and what the legal implications were. Not alarmingly, not dramatically, but clearly. He had also, because Gerald is Gerald, made a few calls. One of those calls was to a housing nonprofit he partnered with for years, which helped low-income adults find transitional housing and rental assistance. He had left Sandra's name with a caseworker. "He called me to tell me this," he said. "I'm not trying to insert myself into a family matter, but I've watched Sandra for a long time, and I know the pattern. She needs accountability and she needs actual help, and those aren't the same thing. I thought you should know both were in motion." I sat with that for a long time. The eviction was finalized 5 weeks after the notice was served. Sandra did not leave willingly. She left with 3 days remaining on her legal deadline, loading her things into a rented van with the help of a friend I'd never met, and she did not speak to me or look at me the entire time. Jade came to help her. Jade, who was on a break from school and who looked exhausted and a little hollowed out, caught my eye once when Sandra wasn't looking and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I shook my head and mouthed back, "Not your fault." The night Sandra's keys were on my counter and her cat was in a carrier and the door closed for the last time, I stood in my living room for a while. The sectional she'd brought was gone, my throw pillows were back. The prints were where I'd rehung them a month earlier. Once Marissa told me I had every right to reassert control of my own space. It was quiet, in a way it hadn't been in months. I cried a little, which surprised me. Not grief crying, more like the kind of crying that happens when your body finally gets permission to release something it's been holding at tension for too long. I wasn't crying for Sandra. I was crying for the version of our relationship I'd spent years maintaining through sheer stubborn optimism, and which had never actually existed. My family was fractured for a while after that. My uncle thought I'd handled it harshly. His wife, who is sharper and has known Sandra longer, told him privately that I'd done what she would have done 2 years sooner. One cousin stopped texting me. Another one, who I'd been less close with, started. People sort themselves out in these situations. You find out who in your orbit has been watching clearly and who's been watching through Sandra's version of events. Nana Jo had me over for dinner 3 weeks later. Just the 2 of us. She made chicken piccata, which is my favorite, and not Sandra's. and I noticed that and didn't say anything about it. We talked for 3 hours. At some point, she set down her fork and looked at me across the table and said, "I enabled her. For a long time, I thought I was protecting her, and I was actually just protecting myself from having to watch her fail. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry it fell on you." I didn't know what to say. I said, "I know." She said, "Keep the condo." I laughed, which she'd intended, and the tightness in my chest eased just a little. Sandra, I learned through Jade, connected with the housing nonprofit Gerald had called. She was placed in a transitional apartment 2 towns over. She got a part-time job at a hotel front desk. She is, as far as I know, managing. Jade visits her. Jade is careful with me about what she shares, which I respect. Sandra has not contacted me directly. The cease and desist is still technically in effect. I don't know if she's angry or ashamed or somewhere past both of those things. I think about that sometimes, late at night, in the quiet of my apartment that is completely and entirely mine. The police report sits in a file on my hard drive. I never pressed charges. But I have it. I will always have it. Last week I finally got around to replacing the coat hook by the front door. The old one had started pulling away from the wall. I bought a new one, simple brass, and I installed it myself with a level and some wall anchors and the YouTube tutorial I've watched 4 times over the years. When I hung my coat on it and it held, I felt something I hadn't felt in the condo in a long time, just mine. Nana Jo turns 81 in the spring. She's already talking about Clement Street Bakery and her good china. She told me she wants the lemon cake again. I told her we'd get 2, just to be safe, and she said that was the smartest thing anyone had said to her in a year. Some foundations hold. You just have to clear out what's been built on top of them that was never supposed to be there. I've been thinking a lot about the word easy lately, how we use it to describe the wrong things. Letting Sandra stay another week was easy. Not saying anything when she moved my furniture was easy. Writing the check, absorbing the inconvenience, smiling through the discomfort. All of it was easy in the moment, and all of it cost me something I didn't realize I was spending until the account was nearly empty. What's hard is the thing I kept putting off, telling the truth out loud in front of people at a birthday dinner for a woman I love, when the version of events I was being handed was so clean and confident that part of me almost wondered if I'd misremembered my own life. Sandra didn't grab my arm because she was desperate. She grabbed it because she'd spent 4 months testing what I would accept, and she'd learned I accepted quite a lot. That's not her fault, not entirely. It was information I had given her, slowly, by choosing the path of least resistance, every single time a boundary needed to be held. Every time I said nothing, I was teaching her that nothing was the answer. What I've come to understand, and I don't say this lightly because it took me a long time to stop excusing it, is that real generosity requires honesty as a foundation. What I was doing with Sandra wasn't generosity. It was conflict avoidance dressed up to look noble. I told myself I was being kind. I was actually being a little bit cowardly. Not the dramatic kind of cowardice, not the kind that makes a good villain. Just the quiet, everyday kind, where you choose your own comfort in the short term and call it patience. The thing about Sandra is that she isn't entirely wrong about one thing. I did have more than her. I had built something through years of deliberate, exhausting choices, and she hadn't. That gap was real. But the gap between us was not a debt she was owed, and no amount of love, and I did love her. In the complicated way you love people who have been in your life since before you were old enough to choose them, no amount of love converts your life's work into someone else's entitlement. Gerald standing up at that table was not luck. It was the consequence of one simple decision I had made years earlier, to build real relationships with people who had integrity. He was there because my grandmother had spent 80 years cultivating a life full of honest people. I was in his orbit because I had tried imperfectly to be someone worth knowing. When the moment came, those threads held. That's not an accident. That's what your choices accumulate into, slowly, over time. And Jade, watching her mouth "I'm sorry" across the chaos of that night, that mattered to me more than she probably knows. Because Jade is 21 and has grown up inside Sandra's patterns and still managed to find her own footing. There is something quietly courageous in that. I don't know what it cost her. I imagine quite a lot. I have my condo back. I have my coat hook and my throw pillows and my tomatoes on the balcony that I grow badly every summer, and intend to keep growing badly for as long as I want. What I gave up was the version of myself that believed absorbing someone else's dysfunction was the same as loyalty. It isn't. Loyalty that requires you to disappear is not loyalty. It's just control with a warmer name. Keep what you built. Be honest about what you're actually doing when you stay quiet, and understand that the people who genuinely love you will still be there after you say no.